Hi and welcome to Weekly Outlook. This is Kim speaking on Monday, the 26th of March. So, starting off with the euro dollar on take two of my recording. Well, euro dollar sitting there trying to push out at the moment on these weeklies. It's looking like, well, it's still in range at the moment, but from a daily perspective, the trend line's been broken. That I've been talking about for probably most of last week. It's been broken at the moment. We've got some potential here for it to run obviously all the way back towards those highs at some point. Potentially there's a few points. In fact, if I come back to the weekly, one of the points I was looking at is beyond the highs there. That weekly 500 looks quite attractive, doesn't it? But of course, is if we can really get some legs into what's actually happening here. It's been a sort of the last 4 weeks, last 3 weeks, two up, one down, in the middle there. Whether we'll see a similar sort of picture here, or if we will gain some proper momentum as we push on through towards, say, the monthly R1 and maybe those prior highs. Certainly that 125 area. I've seen it, saw it last month coming, just pitched through it a little bit back into the highs. It seems a bit of a key area. So it's forgetting the weekly 500 for a moment, but that may be a reasonable target to the upside, potentially anyway. That's if it gets that way. Now, obviously, there's always a chance of the flop back, but I mean, it's a very range-driven market here. At the moment, it's in a wedge. It's in an upward wedge. Maybe, as I said, we'll push up through there. But before I go on too much further, might as well look at the key fundamental data out, and there isn't much. It's really thin this week. I mean, we've got some FOMC speakers this afternoon into the evening, which could create some volatility whenever they're speaking. So we should be wary of that, of course. And then there's very little else. Final GDP on Wednesday. Is really all I can see in terms of key at the moment, which it's the third reading, not necessarily the biggest of movements, maybe a bit of volatility sitting around that. We've got another FOMC speaker on Wednesday, so these FOMC speakers may create more volatility than anything else. Fundamentally, though, final GDP for the UK, so few beans to count. They're quite easy to count and get them right the first time. So not expecting big changes there. Current account, I don't know why they got it in red here. It rarely moves the markets at all. But we'll see. Aside of that, really, okay, some figures may be lower figures here. The personal spending, etc., may give a little bit of a kicker on Thursday. Now it's saying 12:30 there. That's back to 1:30. I haven't updated my time frame on here yet, so they are 1:30, both pieces of news that I've looked at so far. And then, of course, we've got the bank holidays, and as we lead into the bank holidays, needless to say, they can end up with a lot of quiet chop. So there's very little data coming out. So as I said, with the euro, well, it may be, with so little out there, it may push on. One thing we've got to watch out for is the rhetoric between China and the US in terms of trade wars. Obviously, the intellectual property trade violations has resulted in a 50 billion tariff already, and now China are talking about potentially stopping buying US debt. So it may be seeing a bit of a dumping of the US dollar, which could help things like the euro dollar pushing up. So if that comes to be, it may shoot themselves in the foot doing so, but it may be what they need to do to show America they're not an easy pushover. Okay, the pound then. The pound weekly picture looks like it's got the potential pushing up towards the 200. It's getting on its way there. Today it's pushing up towards the higher part of the bar at the moment. It's certainly got the potential to run towards that 200 at the moment. We have got weekly pivots both on the euro and the pound below us, which may yet later in the week maybe, or even early part of the week, get hit. But as I said, with a quieter week, potential dollar weakness, maybe it's an easier route to the upside. We'll watch that carefully. Dollar yen is an interesting one. We talk about risk on, risk off. When the risk is back off, we're seeing the dollar yen selling off strongly, and last week was no exception. We saw it pushing back into new lows again. It's bouncing off that monthly S1 at the moment, heading up towards the weekly pivot at the moment. And I say at the moment, there could be more selling coming through as we've seen traders pushing into this weakness at the moment. However, there is, I mean, coming back to the weekly, there is the divergence running across the weekly lows there. And, well, maybe in a quieter week, it might get a bit of a grip in there. Short term, it's a bit of a muddle to me. And as I said, the risk, and talking of risk, is always the case. It may just roll over and put in a new low. So it has put a pivot swing on the weeklies there. Break of the lows there triggers that sort of idea and may give us more downside. So a bit wary on that at the moment. But as I said, if it holds its own here into that monthly S1 there and starts building up, perhaps it's got the chance of a bit more of a surge in this quieter week. Aussie dollar then, well, coming to the commodity currencies, Aussie dollar, Canadian dollar. Aussie dollar got a bit more of a kick in last week. It was a choppy kick in though. It looked like it was going to do all right for some of the week, and then it just didn't manage to hold on to its gains on Thursday. Friday just, well, again, pushed up, sold off. At the moment, it's trying to maybe gain some purchase again, but lower highs, lower lows, overall picture really becomes the opportunities to sell into maybe these key moving averages as price gets towards them, but nothing significant there. Okay, and then let's have a look at the Canadian dollar. Canadian dollar. Okay, so Canadian dollar, it's putting a bit of a Gartley pattern. I mentioned this last week, and it seems to be gaining a bit of strength here. Maybe more strength than the Aussie, certainly gaining out of things here. The very fact that Trump, I think, has excluded Canada, as I like to call it, from its threats on tariffs, or some tariffs at least, may have helped it. But also we've got the crude oil pushing up, which I'll come to in a moment. But certainly here, bearish, not bearish engulfing, but certainly a solid old bar there. We had a bullish engulf in the previous week, and that didn't really come to much, but see how it goes. There was certainly, on the daily perspective, the sort of divergence of the highs there towards the late previous week, running into this week. Last week, where it's sitting at the moment, well, struggling. It may push below these lows and move back towards the 34.50. It's got its weekly pivot above. It's a bit of a mixed bag at the moment, a bit choppy where it sits, as it sits at the moment from a daily perspective, but certainly got the potential. It's broken a trend line, closed below that trend line now that I drew here last week. So yeah, it's maybe looking for a bit more downside potential. So, yeah, providing the US dollar does continue to soften really across the board. Now I'm going to flick on and just quick look at oil and look at the bigger picture. Oil also put a bit of a Gartley pattern in there, but it looks like it's really trying to break out the top of that a little bit more. So it hasn't completely done so and devoided it, but it's sticking around that sort of 65, 60 sort of zone. Come to dailies here, it's well, just pitched into those prior body highs there. Yeah, most of them it's actually hit there. It's taken the bodies through all of them. May switch over back towards the weekly pivot from here, but certainly had a good shove up in the end last week. Maybe we'll roll a little bit. We'll see how that goes. But one day doesn't really, and it's not even a finished bar here at the moment, so it's a bit of a difficult one. What we're seeing, let's say last week, to me, it just looked like maybe it's got some more legs in it. We'll see. Okay, that's that. A quick look at gold. And from a weekly perspective, again, good solid bullish week in gold there. Expanded out the top there of the bands, pushing up. I mean, it has last week almost pushed up to the bodies of the previous. It may just have a little bit more left there, but it's certainly around this sort of key area, which was previously a selling zone, between that. Let me just get back to the point I want there. 1351 and 1366 was certainly a selling zone into that area previously here, but more near term as well. If it can start pushing up, break beyond those areas, well, we could be back up towards the $14 1400 level. Okay, that's pretty. Oh, I know you want to have a look at the S&Ps. Quick look at the S&Ps then. Let's have a quick look. Weekly picture here. So, well, not quite a definitely lower high confirmed on the weekly basis, but it's not too far off it. The weekly 50 looks like it's calling for the markets at the moment, but this daily 200 just providing support once again on Friday. So certainly a week it may be interesting looking at shorts back into the weekly pivot, maybe back into the 8 if it pushes on through that sort of area. But that weekly pivot certainly wants to be lined up at the moment. Had just about extremed on the lows there, so we could see, as I say, a retracement back down that way at some point. As we run through this week. With a quiet one, it's a difficult one to see what's going on, but it does look weak in terms of what I'm seeing there. Okay, that's pretty much it for me. Nothing else there for a moment, so have a great one. Bye for now.